Welcome to everyone. We are here again for another update on Myanmar. We continue to follow the tragic development in our neighboring country. And again, we have here Debbie Stothard, a well-known activist and intellectual working for many decades on issues related to Myanmar as well as to ASEAN. Please, Debbie, without further ado, go ahead. And as usual, you have about 20 minutes and then to give an update of what has happened in the last months. And then we will open the floor for question and answer. We have also some people here at Junction, and we look forward to have interesting question. I also need to announce that this is the first time we are formally cooperating with Myanmar also to streamline on their sites, on their social media. And we are grateful for that. Please, Debbie.
Hi, Leah. Nice to see you back in the region. I hope you are refreshed by your holiday or your time away. And hi, everyone. I see a familiar name, Jennifer. Are you the Jennifer who stayed in our office 25 years ago? Anyway, hello everybody. I just wanted to share one slide. Hang on, let me do this. Oops, now I can't see the screen. Just hang on a sec. Technical difficulties. Sorry. Share screen. Yes, that's what I want. And I'm screen sharing, yes. So for me, I hope you can see the screen. And it's sorry, Bizima, this is actually a piece from Myanmar now.
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay, so what happened last week is that the IIMM, the United Nations Independent Investigative Mechanism for Myanmar, officially confirmed what we already knew. There's been a dramatic increase in Myanmar war crimes. It's mass execution, sexual violence, and actually what they have not mentioned is airstrikes. Recently, I was up in Mae Hong Son, up on the border, and was horrified to learn of the airstrikes that happened about a month ago in just across the border from Mae Hong Son, an IDP camp of mainly children who had from Karenni State. You know, let's not forget, Karenni State in the first year of the coup had was people in Karenni State in the first year of the coup were 32 times more at risk of military violence than their counterparts in Rakhine during the first year of the coup. So you can imagine, and let's not forget also that Loikaw was the first state capital to be subjected to airstrikes. So you can imagine parents feeling anxious for their children and sending their children to an IDP camp closer to the Thai border in hopes that it is safer and in hopes that their children will be able to somehow continue some form of education. Now, what we heard from people on the ground was that there had been drones and aircraft using Thai airspace to surveil that area before the airstrikes hit. And the airstrikes dropped 5 bombs on this IDP camp. What that meant was that an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old child were killed and several others injured. So when we talk about dramatic increase in Myanmar war crimes, what we are talking about is the deliberate targeting of civilians. And what was really upsetting was to hear local survivors saying, what's wrong with these people? Do they hate civilians? Do they hate kids? They already knew who we were because they were surveilling the area. They knew who we were. They could see who we were. We were not PDF. We were not ethnic resistance organization. We were children and unarmed civilians. So we can already see that targeting civilians is a deliberate strategy. It's not accidental. It's not a bunch of incompetent military accidentally killing civilians in their quest to stop the PDF or the EROs. So I think we really need to light a fire under ASEAN. ASEAN has been literally dicking around, for the want of a better word. It's very hard for me to be diplomatic at this point. Wringing their hands over the violence in Myanmar, but yet enabling the junta to continue its crimes. They have been saying that sanctions are not a good thing. They're not a good strategy. But at this point, every single dollar that goes to that military, that illegal junta is used, is not every single dollar, because of course they feed themselves, the junta, but most of their money is used to perpetrate war crimes. So we really need to see ASEAN step, claiming their 5-point consensus is still the valid way to go. They need to actually substantively engage with people on the ground. They cannot think, they cannot imagine in their wildest dreams that sending aid to the military junta, the biggest perpetrator of these war crimes, is actually going to be used to help people. We're already seeing several months after Cyclone Mocha hit Rakhine State and hit Sagaing and Chin State, that the junta continues to block aid. In July, 2 months after Cyclone Mocha hit and hit the Rohingya the hardest, within as soon as it hit, about 400 Rohingya were killed. 2 months after this cyclone hit, they still haven't approved repairs of shelters in IDP camps for Rohingya. So next month in early September, in a couple of weeks' time, ASEAN is going to have another summit, and they're going to make another statement. And they need to actually start understanding that statements are not enough. Action counts. And when we talk about actions, we're not talking about incidents like in Cambodia, where a few weeks ago, just a meeting talking about humanitarian aid to Myanmar was shut down by the Cambodian authorities, saying that this was an interference in the internal affairs of Myanmar. We can't tolerate this anymore. This is such an irresponsible and oppressive approach, because it not only hurts people in Burma, it hurts people in ASEAN. So I'm going to stop sharing here, because after we start, before we go further, I wanted to change the script. Instead of talking about yet another horrible thing that has happened in Burma, I wanted to share some really amazing news. I've just come from the border. We've been talking about inclusive economic policies with young people of diverse ethnic backgrounds. And it has been so inspiring that these thoughtful women and young people actually have such amazing ideas and commitment to ensure that the economic policies of the future actually are a vehicle for transitional justice for all these crimes that have been perpetrated against the people of Burma since the coup started, but also the long-term conflict and crimes that have been perpetrated against mainly rural ethnic people. We have been talking about making sure that people with disabilities are actively included. They're talking about a bottom-up approach to development. They're talking about environmental protection and sustainability. And not only are they talking about the ideas, they actually came up with systematic proposals on how this can be implemented. So that's been the highlights of my month so far. yes, what's happening in Myanmar is important, but just imagine what could happen in Myanmar if these young people had their say. I know I'm gonna stop. I'm supposed to talk for 20 minutes, but I just want to give the space and hear back from you guys.
We actually have already some questions. So it refers to, the first question is, what do you think of Martin Griffiths' visit? This is the question. What benefits do you think the UN thinks the visit would have to that? I think this was also news this morning on social media. There was quite some discussion about this visit. The second question, how significant are the resistance attacks this week in Pyidaungsu? This is the second question. I have more, but maybe these two, and then we will add some more.
Leah, you mean in Naypyidaw, the attacks on Naypyidaw?
Well, it's written Pyidaungsu, but
Naypyidaw. Okay. To be honest, I've been so
this week. Maybe the one who asked the question can clarify. Yeah, but let's go to the first one, to the Martin Griffiths.
To be honest, I've been in back-to-back workshops all along the border, so I haven't really been paying attention to what's been happening in the past few days. So I have no comment to offer at this point. And what I've been seeing is just some sarcastic comments, and I don't think I should share those sarcastic comments until I've actually done a little bit of reading and consultation. So I think it would be irresponsible for me to even try to answer that question. And was it Naypyidaw or Naypyidaw?
Yeah, well, that we still is not clear. Yeah, is so I am asking to the person who asked the question to clarify. We have other questions, so I will move to that. Would sanction on aviation fuel really make a difference, or would the junta just get support from China and India?
Well, okay. Would aviation fuel sanctions work?
Would make a difference, or would just not mean much because India and China would?
What I wanted to share, I'm going to be running off an infographic that just let me go and look up this infographic because I was just looking at it. So what I wanted to say is that the aviation fuel sanctions are absolutely necessary. When we talk about aviation fuel sanctions in this respect, we have to actually understand that aviation fuel sanctions restrict the number of airstrikes that are perpetrated on people in Burma. You know, the reality is that China, India, and India are not going to be able to completely fund the how do I say this? To completely fund and provide all the aviation fuel that's required. Okay, so so even if we were to restrict a certain proportion of that aviation fuel, it would be absolutely saving lives. And that's something that we need to be very, very conscious about, because I'm just about to share this infographic here, which will actually make you question reality. Just hang on a sec. Okay, let me do this. I'll share the screen again. And here, Okay, so here's the screen. These are the airstrikes, the number of airstrikes between 1st of January this year and 31st of July this year. So this is the first 7 months of 2023. And we're comparing it with the Burma situation with Ukraine, because Ukraine is still a very important conflict that has the world attention and has attracted an immense amount of support from the international community. Now, in Burma, Myanmar, in the first 7 months of this year, there were 470 airstrikes. In Ukraine, it was 1,827. That is almost 4 times the number of airstrikes in Burma, Myanmar. But when you look at the civilian fatalities, you will see that while Ukraine had almost 4 times the number of airstrikes, the number of civilians who were killed was half, almost half of Burma. This is a disproportionate figure. So the number of civilians killed in Burma was, it says 1.92, 192%. So what we are seeing is that every airstrike, and most of these airstrikes are targeting civilians. And if you can even reduce the number of airstrikes by 20% or even 50% in Burma, you're actually saving lives. So I think this is something that we need to understand quite clearly. Aviation fuel sanctions is not just a ban on aviation fuel sanctions. It should be a comprehensive sanction that also targets individuals and companies within jurisdictions of those countries imposing sanctions to stop them from providing or facilitating aviation fuel sales. So it's not just about, it's so easy to say, if we have sanctions, then China or India will fill that gap. I'm telling you now that China and India will not be able to completely fill that gap. That's one thing, that's for sure. And it's not just about even Indian entities who have companies or who themselves are domiciled in the US, for example, if the US were to impose aviation fuel sanctions, would also be subject to those sanctions. So for me, it would be quite shocking to contemplate that, well, these sanctions won't work, so we're not going to try. When you know very well that reducing the number of airstrikes means reducing the number of civilian deaths. And when we even talk about this, what we have to understand, when we talk about weapons, everyone has been talking about Burma buying weapons from Russia, and Russia being a supplier. What we have seen is that now we've actually seen some of these weapons, evidence of Russia using junta manufactured weapons in the Ukraine. So how wonderful. Min Aung Hlaing is getting in on the act. He's actually sending weapons to the Russians to use on Ukrainians. How sweet. I wonder what it looks like on his Instagram feed. What is he posting? We've already been warning for ages that this relationship between Russia and Burma, between the military, is going to be really, really problematic. But now we can already see that instead of only contributing to horror and tragedy and war crimes in Burma, Russia, Burma is also contributing directly to the horror and the crimes in Russia. So a couple of weeks ago, the Ukrainian military and Ukrainian military analysts said that 120-meter mortar rounds manufactured in Burma were being used by Russia in Ukraine, and they were and the junta sources confirmed they were manufactured by the junta's Directorate of Defense Industries, and they were probably produced specifically or in collaboration with Russia. So that was the sting in the tail of ASEAN's Coup Watch Briefer covering the month of July, which was produced last week. You can find the whole report online. 22 pages of crimes, and shock and horror and nasty shit happening in Burma, but also what was very interesting. So the hot gossip is that when Myanmar Oil and Gas Enterprise, the main income earner of the junta, was sanctioned, finally, the junta started organizing alternative banks, because the sanctions were also on these specific banks, which had the bank accounts of Myanmar Oil and Gas, MOGE. So Myanmar Oil and Gas quietly went and set up new bank accounts elsewhere, hoping to circumvent those sanctions. And the information got leaked out. So they were caught with their pants down. And what did they do as soon, on the same day, immediately as soon as the leaked information about these alternative accounts was revealed? The junta actually went and raided Myanmar Oil and Gas Enterprise and arrested a whole bunch of people and subjected them to interrogation to find out who leaked the news of those accounts. So you can see that they're taking sanctions very seriously. The junta is overexpended. It spent too much on the war machine. It's not able. They've killed the Myanmar Chat. The Myanmar Chat, which was around 1,500 Chat to the dollar when the coup started, is now sunk to more than 3,000 Chat, around the 3,000 Chat mark at market rate. That's quite horrifying and shocking that within 2.5 years this can happen. But it also means that people are scrambling, even people within the junta, even judges in the court are scrambling to make as much money as possible. I had a friend in distress contacting me saying that someone she knew in a relatively well-off ASEAN country, he was a Burmese migrant worker. His wife had been arrested in Burma by the local police, who said, "We know your husband is working in this country. That means he must have a lot of money. Therefore, you must give us this amount of money or we'll charge you with terrorism." So people are actually using threat of terrorism charges to extort money out of civilians. You don't actually have to do anything. You just have to look like you have money, potentially. And so this is basically a situation that's gone so awry that, when we talk about economics and we talk about the junta, how can we not say that sanctions are necessary? Because even if we were to throw billions at the junta, they would not fix the economy. They'd use it to further victimize the population. So it's a free-for-all in Burma at the moment, and it's quite horrifying to see what's going on. But it's also quite inspiring to see, despite all these persecution, all these horrible things that are happening, young people in the country are still trying to talk about how to reconstruct the future. And I think it's so important because, there's been such fierce resistance and such fierce fighting against the junta. But instead of fighting the junta, we should be fighting for something. Instead of fighting against the junta, we really need to think about what we are fighting for.
This is quite an optimistic message, but we have a lot of questions which worry about somewhat more negative development. But first, two related to this financial issue. One is the bank in Singapore, UOB, which has also imposed sanctions on money coming from Myanmar or account from Myanmar, and maybe it's interested to know whether the other banks, do you think, will follow or not, and the significance of this. And then the second question related to the money, what you were talking about the value of the kyat now is inside the country is 3,100. But outside, when the UN and the NGOs bring in money officially into the country, the official rate is 2,100. So the junta makes the difference and use this for war crimes. So do you consider the UN as funding war crimes? This is the question. It's not my question, yeah? It's the question from someone here in the Zoom call. Now there is the other one. I think we stop here first and then we go to the Pyidaungsu, which actually is Pyidaungsu question, but let's first answer these two. So the bank in Singapore and the difference in official rate and actual rate and the implication on whether the UN are funding crime, war crimes. Yeah.
So OUB responding in Singapore is really quite interesting because from the very beginning, even before transition, even before the transition started in Burma, we had been going after banks in Singapore because the banks themselves were basically the safe, the big money safe of the junta. And it was quite normal to hear of junta officials bringing big bags of money as hand luggage in direct flights from Yangon to Singapore. So there was always this tension about whether Singapore would take proper anti-money laundering measures, even from those days. And we know very well that as soon as there's a sign of trouble, people would actually, Singapore would be one of the destinations for the junta and their cronies to keep their money. So this is a good sign, but it's also, and it's actually an exposition of how globalized we really are. If the US were imposing sanctions and the types of sanctions they impose, it could implicate Singapore entities if they broke those sanctions, because many of those banks need to have officially good relationship with US banks. And US dollar is the main currency of exchange that we use in this region. What is quite interesting when we look at this, the US dollar, is that, okay, I should actually take off the label so I'm not advertising a product. Just hang on a sec. Okay, I'm not advertising the product. Is that, just imagine, oh my God, okay, just imagine this bottle is, the bottle of water is a US dollar. Now, if you bought that, the water in the bottle, the value of the dollar belongs to you. But the US, because it's US currency, still owns the bottle itself. So that means that the US has some control over how this money is used, because when I transfer money from Kuala Lumpur to you, Leah, in Bangkok, I will be not transferring US, won't be transferring Malaysian ringgit, I'll be transferring US dollars. And that US dollar transfer goes through a computer controlled by the US in US jurisdiction. So they can actually block flow of US dollars if they wish to. It also means that if a bank in Singapore is breaking sanctions, legal sanctions in the US, it could make it difficult for it to continue business with US entities and US banks. So you can see our local banking system is very much dependent on having a good relationship with the US system. And so quite clearly, somebody in Singapore is feeling a little bit of heat and understanding that their financial relationship with the junta is not that much when it's compared to the ongoing and future financial relationship with US entities, because we depend on US banking infrastructure at that level. So, you know, when it happened, of course, I was really happy, because for a lot of time, for many, many years, we've been talking about this, and this would constitute a breakthrough. But I hope that this is not just a kind of, how do we say, a token gesture, Singapore basically saying to the US and the rest of the world, get off our back, we just did one, enough. So we do need to think about comprehensively, you know, making sure that the junta and their cronies understand that war crimes are not profitable. We must not allow war crimes and crimes against humanity to be profitable for the junta, whether it's aviation fuel sanctions or whether it's basically going after their money. After all, we'll need this money to compensate and to help all these victims of war crimes and crimes against humanity to rebuild their lives. And the other question was, sorry.
Okay, the other question was, but first one related, because just arrived, the Thai baht has been allowed now to use, it's yesterday news, to use as currency for import-export transaction to Myanmar. Do you think it by needs to give pressure to Thai bank?
Well, you know,
Case.
Eventually things will happen in a certain way. This is all these measures trying to for the junta to do direct transactions in Chinese yuan, trying to say, okay, we'll take Thai baht now and so on. It's a sign that they are actually under a lot of pressure. I wanted to share with you another photo. Just hang on a sec, because you know this really makes me so happy and excites me. Not this one, but here. Look at all those proposals. You know, I was talking about that workshop. Look at all those proposals. People actually going through all of these sectors, making very interlinked, very innovative and very inclusive proposals for how they want their economy to look like in the future, what type of policies they want. They're actually making a graphic. They're actually using graphics to try and visualize how things will get related. So yeah, here's a little bit of taste of some of the amazing stuff I was exposed to. But yeah, and then we go to the next question. We had
okay, so we go to the next question. There are two still. One, the first is the one I mentioned before. We were not sure about the name, but it's Pyidaungsu. So it's asked basically, the war has finally reached the junta regime capital. So there have been attacks on Pyidaungsu to a base, infantry base, battalion 411, which is based in the township of Pyidaungsu. And so what is the significance of this in terms of how the war is going? So the attacks now is not only outside of the capital area, but also in the capital area, what it implies. We have also read, I am adding here, that some paper that has been circulated unofficially, it shows that the number of soldiers and other battalion is much less than what officially announced. So all this seems to indicate kind of some losing, at least some losing ground. But we'd like to know your view on this. And then the second question, probably last question, is well, it seems it's not going so good in Thailand after all the enthusiasm about the victory of the Move Forward Party, but probably Orange is still on sidelines at the moment, and we may see a reddish green, so to say, Pyidaungsu, a military government, whatever it will be, fully military or with the military. What is the implication for Myanmar? If you remember, a few episodes ago, there was some enthusiasm about the so-called foreign affairs expert of Move Forward party indicated a very different approach to Myanmar. But what if now it seems what is going on in Thailand is not as promising as it looked a few months ago?
Yes, here we were hoping for move forward and then it went backward in Thailand. Orange is still my favorite color personally. That's why the ASEAN logo has orange in it. Before the Move Forward Party was actually founded. But I want to say that, you know, we personally, it feels as though there's been some type of soft coup, that the people's will have been circumvented in a soft way. And I think voters will not forget. And eventually it will be inevitable that the people that the voters voted for in Thailand will have to come up. It's simply a matter of time. Let's not forget, PITA and the Move Forward Party members are much younger than us. They'll be here after the guys who have found a way to get themselves in power are gone, are dead and gone. So, you know, time is off. It makes the difference. But in as far as Burma is concerned, time is also of the essence. And we hope that whoever is in charge, they're not in love with Min Aung Hlaing as Prayut was. We can stop the I'm at least glad that the Prayut Min Aung Hlaing bromance is over. We hope that there's no new bromances made, and that you know, Thai leaders need to understand, and we hope they understand, that it's in Thailand's interest for the situation in Burma to be reversed. It's not good for human security in the region. It's not good for sustainable development. It's not good for even the environment or public health in Thailand. And there's only two sectors in the Thai economy that are benefiting from the war in Burma. It's the education sector and it's the private health sector. So those who can afford it are coming here to study or to get medical assistance. So I think this is important to understand, but that while two sectors, very specific sectors, are doing well in Thailand and they're benefiting from the war, the reality is that this benefit is not sustainable. It's not going to go on forever if the situation continues to deteriorate. Eventually, Thailand will be infected by what's going on in Burma, if it has not already been infected on so many levels. So I think if, you know, Thailand, it's in Thailand's interest to reverse this trend. It's not in their interest for this violence to continue, particularly violence by a junta that doesn't really care about its neighbors or its own citizens. Now, there was an attack, thank you, there was an attack in Naypyidaw 2 days ago, but it's important to note that on 7th of July, the Taungoo District PDF, People's Defense Force, ambushed a military convoy near Naypyidaw. And so there have been attacks in Naypyidaw before or close to Naypyidaw, and quite clearly the resistance wants to tell Naypyidaw that their days are numbered. They don't have the troop strength that they had, number one. And also, let's not forget, the first person to be killed by the illegal junta was a young woman in Naypyidaw. That was the first fatality. the CDN came out on the streets in Naypyidaw. It was the public servants in Naypyidaw who came out to protest the coup. So Naypyidaw itself has resistance, as much as the junta hates to admit it. And if we see that the troop strengths, I think it was LID, the LID 144, I think, was referred to as having, I don't know, 20% troop strength of what it's supposed to have. I'm sorry, I don't have the figures right on me. It actually helps us understand this picture. This massive military of 400,000 people, it was already said by various experts early on in the coup that out of these 400,000 people, less than a quarter of them can actually fight. The rest of them are guarding, are basically glorified security guards or officials of the military's various businesses. So that is something that we need to understand. That we also need to understand that this military is not used to people fighting back. They're really not used to fighting. They are used to shooting and killing and raping people and letting them run away. They don't expect people to resist them and fight back. And also, they've been killing family members of military of the lower ranking officers. Let's not forget that Magwe and Sagaing, we've seen some of the worst attacks in recent times, is where the military recruits its soldiers. You're basically killing the mothers and fathers of your soldiers. You're killing their brothers and sisters and their cousins. So do you think they will want to keep on fighting for you? So now we have people who've defected from the police and the military who don't want to have anything to do with it, or people who have defected from the police and military helping the PDFs and the ethnic resistance organizations. You are in trouble, Min Aung Hlaing. It's time to get up on your jet and go hide out somewhere in China, because your days are numbered. And actually, anyone who's in the military are probably taking all their money out of Burma and hiding it somewhere else because they know their days are. The issue is how much more damage will they inflict on the civilians in the meantime? I think that's the main question. Sorry, Leah, you are muted.
Yes, I am always forgetting to unmute, but okay, I am back. And with this, I think also because Debbie has to leave, so I think we can, if there are no urgent questions, I think we have already treated quite a lot of topics varying from financial issue and sanction to the fight on the ground. There are many more also related to the visit of the UN, recent humanitarian, high-level humanitarian official, and the relative, as usual, photo.
Sorry, I didn't answer the humanitarian question about UN.
Yeah, because you say you were gone, but maybe you know something. So please say.
You know, this is reminiscent of a report that we put out more than 20 years ago called Piece of Pie, about how for every dollar that was sent to UN and INGO in Burma, the military already scooped out more than 30% automatically because of the difference in exchange rate. And what was very interesting was that when we exposed some of these failures of humanitarian aid, including dispensing suppositories, which are supposed to go up your butt, as pills, which go in your mouth, and all kinds of crazy stuff that was happening. The donor countries, the countries that were giving money to the UN to help the people in Burma, were shocked to realize that such a huge proportion of their contribution was automatically being eaten up by the military junta in those days under Kinyut, Tamtre, etc. So they actually got quite shocked and they actually objected. And this is actually very interesting because prior to that, when even the national staff and other CSOs were saying, why are you accepting such an oppressive exchange rate? These INGOs and UN agencies that says there's no choice, there's no option, that's the way things are done, you just have to live with it. But when their donors said, we're not happy that so much of our money is being automatically eaten by the junta, that's when they went racing to the junta to renegotiate the exchange rate. So I think it's quite important at this point for donor states to actually ask some tough questions on what is an acceptable margin to feed the junta? And do you really think that that's going to be justified by the number of people that you're helping? The reality is there are so many community-based organizations that have been operating with so much risk, with less cost, and still helping people and trusted by the people who need their help. We don't, and they are able to work out how to get beyond the aid restrictions that the junta and the travel restrictions that the junta imposes on INGOs and on the UN. Because guess what? These are brown people. So they can get around as locals. So they are actually doing all this amazing work. Why don't we give the money to them? It's going to be more helpful. Why do we have to go through this rigmarole? It's time for us to actually think, what will build local community resilience? Is it a bunch of UN people sitting in Rangoon saying, we are in the country, so we know what's going on, even though we're not allowed to go out of town? Or is it the people who are moving around on the ground from the affected community, helping the affected community? So that's my question.
Yeah,
And
well, very valid question, which I've been asked actually for many years, like you say, in terms of reforming or decolonizing. This is now the trendy term, right? Decolonizing aid and not only scientific research. But I think indeed it's a very important question also because like we have seen with this last visit, it follows then photographs in the newspaper that give validity to the junta being in place. And this is what is being questioned in a number of articles, including by progressive voices today, and maybe you can find those in social media, but it's basically the same question that they've been asking, plus the question of legitimacy that is given to the junta by accepting to go to this meeting and sitting there with all the generals. So for this is the conclusion of this update. We will be seeing again on next month, more or less on the same dates, again for another update. In the meantime, we have other programs focusing on environment, on migration, and many other topics. So please do continue to follow. I thank AJAR as our a long-time partner and now the new media partner, Mizima. Thank you very much and see you soon, Debbie. Have a good trip.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining. And if you're in town, please go to see Junction. It's such a cool space and a cool building. Catch you later. Bye.
And a cool staff. Bye-bye.
Oh yes, the cool staff too, including the cool executive director.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.